When I started working with you, probably one of the best things that ever happened is when I started having somebody
Mm,
else do the things,
yeah.
realizing that I was paying more money to try to do it myself because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Well, early on, and when I was first doing my own business, even before you and I started, I was always trying to do everything myself. Whether I didn't have the money or I was just too cheap. I probably both, but I
Okay.
really had kind of this cheap mindset that I just need to do it because it's going to cost me to bring that. And when I started working with you, probably one of the best things that ever happened is when I started having somebody
Mm,
else do the things,
yeah.
realizing that I was paying more money to try to do it myself because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Like when I tried to
Yeah.
do my books, and when I tried to do my own taxes, and when I tried to do, and I
Yeah.
look back and think about some of that stuff and think, I'll bet I lost a lot of money because I didn't really know what I was doing. And I could
Yep.
have hired somebody who knew what they were doing, handed it off to them, and I would have been so much better off so much earlier.
That's a
And
good point.
so, I mean,
Yeah.
I right off, I learned that quickly
Yeah.
starting to work
Yeah.
with
That's
you.
a good point. Sometimes I tell people a story, and I probably told you this. One of the leased car that we were about to turn in went off the road, and I was telling my CPA about that. And really, I was just about it. I was like, you won't believe this. I'm turning it in 2 days, $18,000 of damage. And he's like, wait, go buy a new truck. Hurry. Do it before the end of the year. And it was like a $60,000 tax deduction that I got. And if
Yeah.
I wouldn't have that call, I had no rush to go get a new car. And I was just like kind of pissed that it happened. But in hindsight, it's one of those moments where having the right people to do the right thing, like that not only saved me that much money, but it also made taxes are. So I was paying less on all the other income too. Like it was just such a boon. And I was like, honey, way to wreck the car. Good job. I went from pissed to like, we're going out tonight. Do you remember if there was a specific point, or maybe it was after we started working together a little bit that transition came? Was there a point before you were like, this isn't working and I need to start figuring out how to hire others or delegate or something? Or was it kind of like after the fact?
I think before I realized I needed to, but like I said, I think it's partly I was just too cheap. And so balancing
Mm.
that, of thinking that it was going to cost me money instead of thinking it was going to make me money. But it wasn't until I actually saw it through working with you
Right.
that I actually realized, wow, I really needed it. Like I said, I probably cost me money for not doing it. And the whole time I was thinking it
Mm-hmm.
cost me money by trying to do it, if I would have hired somebody.
Yeah. It makes me think of like, I still get coaching. I've always believed in it. One of the principles of one of my coaches told me is you don't hire people to grow your business. You hire people to get your time back so you can grow your business.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's a really cool concept that keeps you from hiring out of order because
Yeah.
we fantasize about this one person who's going to come in with one horn on their head and be the unicorn. And it's like, I'm going to save everything and you're just going to sit on the beach and check in once a week. That sounds great, but it often takes some real build up to get to a point like that.
That's exactly what I was just talking about, Death Simplified, that, I'm so much in the weeds where I shouldn't be, that it's taken
Mm.
away from time of really being able to think, okay, how do you grow? How do you go to that next step? Who should we be contacting? What market should we be getting into? And so forth.
Okay, love that idea. Is there anything more as far as before we started working together? Did you feel like you were kind of stuck or stagnant, or was there anything like that going on in particular?
I mean, I would say, yeah, I definitely felt stuck. There's no doubt about it. I felt stuck where I was. There's so much in running a business, People
Mhm.
already talked about books, but talking about trying to get work done, trying to pay bills, trying to do everything and still have a family and live
Yeah.
life outside of the business. And I definitely felt stuck and I didn't know for sure how to take the step to get out of where I was at. So it wasn't until we started working together that I started seeing it, that
Some different paradigms. Yeah.
yeah, I knew I needed somebody to come in and help. I just didn't know how to get there.
A lot of people I talk to seem to be hovering in this area, like the floor and the ceiling. And in
Mhm.
between is like this comfort zone that when it gets too high, like things get really complicated and there tends to be this downturn. And then revenue slides until it hits a floor where it's like, I can't survive there. And all of a sudden it comes up. And it usually comes back to like the founder tries to work on delegating things or getting out of some part of the business. And so they push things off and then they may focus more on delivery than sales. And then they come back and realize it's
Yeah,
dipping. So I'm going
that's
to
it.
focus on sales. Up it goes.
Yeah.
I have clients that have been in business for 25 years and they've operated $3-4 million of revenue and they've been within 100,000 bucks every single year for 25 years. Like you said, Joel, nobody tells us when we start a business, like you've got to start thinking about how to do time management. You got to start thinking about learning how to deal with people management and talent improvement and recruiting. Well, then there's numbers and God forbid we talk about taxes. Like all those things scare the hell out of us. So sometimes we need a little outside input.
Yeah, and I think it's also easy, and I caught myself doing this a lot, is that you go back to your comfort zone. Since I was a software developer, that's where I felt comfortable. And so I'd start
Ah,
getting at these and I'd start getting frustrated and whatever. whatever. So then I'd go back where I felt like I was being productive, kind of like what you were saying. But
Yeah.
that's where I was most productive, and so that's where I was most comfortable. And then a lot of times you just start really those other spots. They go down and down and down.
Yeah, yeah,
You
man.
see it and you feel it, but you're still saying, okay, look at all this progress I'm making because you're doing it.
Right.
It's good,
Yeah. So you're staying busy. Yeah, that's true. What was the shift? What's been one of the biggest wins so far from things that you've pulled out, different paradigms that you've worked? Because now you're in a much different boat. You've got a couple of different businesses, at least I know of. You're dealing with things differently. So describe that part of it and what was kind of some of the key things that you pulled out that was game changing for you.
First of all, really coming up with a clear goal and understanding really what I wanted. We all have these big dreams of what we want to do, but really being able to clearly identify in my mind and on paper of knowing, okay, this is what I want to do. And then being able to clearly identify. And a lot of this was watching and experience from you, obviously, and then see, okay, in order to get from where I'm at today to get to where I want to be, what do I need? Who do I need? What do I need? What needs to change? I like that you just mentioned the floor and ceiling because back since you and I have been working from day one, I think I've been more and more focused on what the floor is and am I raising that floor? And I think that ceiling kind of raises with it.
Yeah, that's cool. Those floor and ceilings are really tied to standards, not necessarily hopes, right? So when your standard shifts, and you're like, okay, no longer is this floor down here acceptable. Now it's up here. Then usually that ceiling will go with it because your whole comfort zone thermostat sort of shifts up. And that requires a new you to show up. And that's what some people don't get, that they have the dreams. Usually they're fuzzy. And when they start getting clear, like yours did, it's very clear that my standard has to go up. Right. If I want that, I have to do this thing. I can't do those things. And I've got to be focused on certain things where others need to be off the table. And that starts to change who shows up every day of the week, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I was talking to my niece the other day. She's getting married and she came to me and asked for some advice and stuff. We talked about all these problems that she thought was her fiance's problem. And I'm thinking, and I talked to her, I go, no, that's your problem. These are things you've got to deal with and you've got to understand, what you want out of life and then personal development. I'm 100% sold on personal development. It's everything. You want a good marriage or a good business or whatever it is.
Yep.
You start with yourself.
If between your ears is messed up, it's hard to put any kind of systems, any kind of operating procedures, any kind of playbooks into place because you'll sabotage it, you'll wreck it, right? So focusing here first allows that graduated elevation change. So I think you said it very well. Yeah. Like if anybody's out there listening here or here's a little clip of this or anything, Joel, if someone were in your position that you were in then before we started working, like they're feeling a little bit stuck, if they're not really sure what their clear objectives are, like what would you tell them?
Realize, and this has partly come with age as well, is that we realize we only live once. We're all going to die. We're only here for a certain amount of time. So quit, worrying about so much. And I used to be so afraid of failure. And now I'm completely fine with failure. I'm sure it'll hurt, but I realize that is the step, and so remove failure from being a fear and understand it's a growth. It's a step to get us to where we want to be. And it's almost a requirement. We've got to fail in order to take that next step in order to figure out where we need to grow. Like you said about pressure. That is what makes us grow. And the failure to see it happen and then take responsibility that it's my failure. It's not somebody else. I didn't fail because this or that. I failed because of me. And then here's what I can do to change that.
I love that. The responsibility part, especially because I remember in my early years, like before we got hooked up and before I got my own together, I always had a reason why things didn't work, and that reason was always outside of me. Exactly. It was that guy's fault, and he never showed up, and she missed the meeting, and all these things, and it never until I was like, buck stops here. That's the only time that I was able to start turning those failures into data points that gave me feedback to say, that's not the outcome I want. I got to adjust. But when I blamed somebody else, then I was cooked the whole time.
Yeah. My personality too, from the youngest age I can remember, I was afraid of everything. And so through the years to actually conquer that, to me, that is one of the main obstacles that kept me from succeeding earlier in my life.
That's awesome. Is like coaching, advising, consulting, is this something you'd recommend to others? And if so, why?
I think you always need to get around people who are doing what you're doing and are going through the same things or have done what you're doing. And so, I think it's extremely important. As you know, if you get into your little circle and you don't get outside of your circle, you're not going to grow past your circle. So it's very important to go meet people who are hopefully above you, who've done what you want to do and can walk you through. And if nothing else, give you motivation to make it through the fear, the scary parts, and to tell you, hey, you can do that. You get synergy from it as well.
Totally, right? That old saying, like you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Another quote that I heard recently personally is the version of you that wants to stay the same is always going to show up and fight to stay the same because that is your comfort zone, the floor and the ceiling. And so you have to be deliberate to push past that. And if the best hack is what you just said, surround yourself with people that will help you level up faster, because then it almost happens by osmosis. Like there's a factor of just the synergy, and the osmosis effect goes into a place, and it's like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and I will say too, and I don't know how many people are in the same boat as me, but I'm more of an introvert, so that's not a comfortable thing to go into a place. But when you get into more of a coaching environment, they're the introverts, so they can pull that out of you, and they can kind of pull you into that where you don't need to go into a room and start trying to make relationships. Hopefully they're coming to you and pulling you into those relationships.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. That's an excellent point, actually. Otherwise, it kind of feels a little bit like going to a therapy session and you're sitting around a circle and you have to share. Okay, any final thoughts that you'd want to share with anybody who's on the fence?
I mean, I think it's worth it. What's nice about any business you do is that overcoming yourself along with building the business. And so it's fun to see not only a business grow, but yourself grow with the business, and to be able to look back and really see they really are parallel. And it's very interesting and gratifying. Money aside, everything else aside, I think both of them are really gratifying to do.